Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 19-year-old son, Joey, who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Ridghaus, who describes himself this way on his website. He's a human being / a human becoming, a lifelong learner, an archaeologist of cultural artifacts, a Buddhist priest, a poet, a teacher, a creator, a guide, and a father of 6, parent of 5, with 4 of them still breathing. There's a lot in there to uncover. Ridge intersects with adoption several ways, and he has employed a unique and somewhat controversial healing modality that has helped him and others greatly. I met Ridge at the Untangling Our Roots Summit in Louisville earlier this year, and since then I've discovered some of his creative work, such as the 6-word adoption memoirs. Let's get to know this original visionary human together in this episode. Thanks for being here, Ridge.
Hi, Beth. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah. I want our audience to know the couple ways that you have been touched by adoption, and I wonder if you can give us a concise version of those intersections so they can get to know you a bit.
It's always interesting to compress a lifelong journey into a couple of minutes.
I know it's not fair, is it?
I wouldn't say that it's not fair. I think it's just one of the challenges when you start to look at roles or particular identities. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, tell me more about that, but do so in under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is just what we face, right?
I know.
We face as people in the roles that we have, but it's also things we just face as humans, because, we live in this time finited space.
Yep. How do you sum up a life? Exactly.
My first connection to adoption land comes through relinquishing a son when I was 19. His name is Zach, and he and I have a good relationship. It was an open adoption, and we've been in touch since his birth. So that's the first connection to adoption. The second connection to adoption land comes through my own discovering my adoption when I was 35. Oof. So Zach was 16. I had a social worker from the state reach out and tell me that the birth mother wanted to be in touch with me. And so I thought the social worker is referring to Zach's birth mother, since I had never been told that I was adopted. So I was shocked to discover that it was my birth mother who wanted to be in touch with me.
That was a phone call. Holy cow.
Yeah, it was a doorway that led to basically the last 16 years of being involved deeply in adoption spaces. I was always connected to Zach, but the broader adoption experience around policy and et cetera, I was largely oblivious to. So it's a new door.
Yeah, I bet. And before you found out about your own adoption, you were in an open adoption with Zach, which is beautiful, I think. I'm sure that was challenging and beautiful, but I wondered how much connection you had with other relinquishing fathers. I mean, is there groups for people like that?
Yeah, even now. I mean, that was 1990, so 33 years ago. And I think open adoption started to hit some of the academic journals in the early 80s. So it was a fairly recent phenomena in modern adoption. But I had one person that I knew who was also a biological father, and we had connected around something independent of that. And aside from a few conversations that we had about our placed children, that there was never any kind of support or whatever. With social media and internet spaces, I think that there's more opportunity, and yet I still fail to see significant groups or support or conversation around biological fathers.
Yeah, you see things for birth moms. Sometimes I guess they say birth parents, but I figure 98% of those are going to probably be the moms, yeah?
Yeah, it would be difficult to quantify, but more often it's biological mothers that have support. And to be honest, Zach's biological mom had a more challenging experience than I did.
Sure.
She
It was
went through
different.
9 months
Yeah.
of gestating.
Yes.
And so for hers, it was a very physical plus emotional
Hmm.
experience. And for me, it was much more emotional. And then that emotion continued to ripple out into my life even now.
I bet. And especially after you found out you were also adopted, I bet that just like, woo,
Yeah,
raised
that
thing
was
up.
a whole new set of
Yeah.
filters through which to see life.
Wow. And were your adoptive parents still alive when you found out? And did they have some explaining to do? I mean, how does that conversation go?
They were alive. We had been estranged for several years, minimal contact, birthdays, occasional holiday kind of telephone calls. And, I would
Okay.
try to go and check in on them. But home was a challenging experience. They were
Okay.
both drunks. And so,
Tough. Okay.
yeah, I chose to have a different kind of life,
Yeah.
which unfortunately included not having them as
Yeah.
part of my daily. So they denied that I was adopted. They insisted that the state had made a mistake.
What?
And
Oh my gosh. That's some deep denial. Ooh-wee.
yeah. And, I've had 17 years to kind of work through this, and I'll have however many more that I continue to walk this plane.
Yeah.
And I get it. They were in a generation of you get out of high school, you go to work, you have kids, you water the lawn.
Yep. Then do it all over again the next day.
Yeah, right. So there was a lot of social expectation, both within their families, because they were the only ones who did not have children amongst all of their siblings, and socially, more broadly, that was a thing. So how do you reconcile the shame around not being able to biologically have children with all of these social expectations? And then they just didn't have tools.
Right.
They relied on alcohol and drugs to
gosh, I'm so sorry.
navigate every day.
Were you their only child?
I had a younger sister. She was 6 years younger, so we were technically, according to sociology of family studies, we were two only children.
6 years apart makes you like a starting all over.
We were each and only, raised under the same roof.
Yeah, right. But she was a biological child of theirs?
She was not a biological child. When the social worker told me about my adoption, I said, well, listen, I grew up with a sister, and you probably can't reveal this information to me, but should she reach out? And the social worker was like, yeah, I can't tell you anything. She should reach out.
Oh, okay. They just told you then. Okay. But if you were 6, did your mother stuff a pillow in her pants or what? You probably were aware of.
Yeah, that was a fascinating query for me to go back to, because I remember them leaving for what they said to me was, we're going to the hospital and we're going to have a baby, right? And does a 5, I was 5-ish.
You're 5,
Do we really have a concept? I mean, I don't recall having a clear concept of biology at that point.
Maybe only if you were around a lot of other pregnant people at the time,
Right.
like if you had a big family or something and had other people that you knew that got pregnant and then.
Which we weren't.
Okay. Wow. So in your 30s, that's just a big mind fuck that happened to you, right? This is like, what? Oh, Lordy.
Yeah, it took a couple of years to kind of emerge from a stunned sensation.
Oh, I can imagine. And did you try to find your birth parents?
Well, fortunately, the reason that the state had contacted me.
Oh, yeah, she was looking for you.
Yeah, my biological mom was. 5 days later, I get a card in the mail that was handwritten by my biological mom, giving me her contact information. And, I called her right away, and we did DNA and confirmed everything. And we've been in reunion since.
And that's gone well as it can go?
Oh, I think it probably could have gone better. But my heart really breaks when some of my adoptee friends or my NPE friends talk about secondary rejection.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, I didn't really have a say in the first place.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with me by not giving me a say in the second.
Yeah.
That's such a dirty deal.
Yeah.
That they get.
Yeah.
But fortunately, since she was looking for me, we had connection. In retrospect, I probably would have brought a adoption competent therapist on board, facilitated communication. I think it would have smoothed out some of the earlier rough patches. I think it would have given me some more insight into the maelstrom that was fomenting inside of me, with questions and how to handle this and that. But didn't have that wisdom. I just walked forward because I wanted to know.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you're just like, bring it now, all of it, I'm sure
Yeah.
that impulse is very strong to want to know everything. Yeah. I'm learning from all of you adoptees. So if my son ever wants to go searching, we're going to go as slow as possible with the therapist. But I can imagine it's just like when you start dating or something, you just don't want to go slow. You just want to get to it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure it will be very difficult to keep it.
I think one of the challenges that an adoptive parent can face in this situation, there are several, right? Adoptive parents should be doing their own work.
Mm-hmm.
Their identity should not be wrapped up in being an adoptive parent.
Right.
They should have their own identity.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Aside from that. But I think one of the challenges is that adoptive parents should probably be saying, listen, I will help you search,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in favor of this,
Mm-hmm.
without saying that every single day to make it feel like, you're edging them out, right? So there's this tension of, please search. I'm here for you. You don't have to search if this feels uncomfortable, but I'm on your side.
It is a delicate balance because I kind of want to know.
Yeah.
I kind of would like this mystery solved, but it's not my place to drive this train. And I'm just trying to be kind of his secretary at this point in the search process. And at this point, he doesn't really want to do anything. So right now I'm just kind of out of a job in that regard. But I'm just trying to help him with the logistics because I'm probably better at navigating that stuff and keeping track of stuff and just following his lead. But there's so many adoptive parents that don't want to talk about it at all, which I think is too much the other way.
And it could also be an indicator of the work they haven't done.
Right.
Themselves.
They're feeling very threatened or like there's only a limited amount of love that can go around or something like that.
Right.
So
it's not a pie.
But yeah, there's enough for everybody. Yeah, it's very complex. And your situation with so much denial with your adoptive parents and the late discovery, that it's just so much. And what tools did you grab at the time? And what tools are you using now to navigate complex emotions?
Yeah, for 2 years, I had a couple of adoptee friends that I would talk to every now and then. I had a friend who was a therapist 15 years earlier, diagnosed me as adult child of alcoholic.
Okay.
And I saw him as a therapist for a while.
Okay.
And we maintained a hearty friendship after the therapy work had wrapped up. But now the adult child of alcoholic felt, while it was true in ways in that I was a parentified child taking care of two drunks, it was also not true. There were overlaps in the diagnoses of adoption trauma or just kind of childhood trauma, CPTSD kind of stuff, with the adult child of alcoholic. And so once I understood, I'm adopted, that shifted my capacity to be able to face and focus on other parts of my personality or my behaviors or whatever. So for a couple of years, it was really, I don't want to say it was casual in that it lacked focus. It wasn't light work at all, but it was casual in that I didn't have a laser point kind of focus. Brian Stanton, Desiree Stevens, we went to adoption conferences together.
Okay.
So we'd go to a workshop on something, get all triggered, and then just sit around, drink and talk, about the things that were triggering us. So it was really a means of finding community, support, being able to express things that were troubling me. And that in conjunction with the therapy, particularly when I got into some somatic therapy, those were really complementary tools in order to give me a greater sense of peace, satisfaction, and wholeness for myself.
Can you explain what somatic therapy kind of looks like? I know there's lots of different kinds, but what did it look like for you?
Yeah, I think somatic therapy can take a lot of different approaches. Like it can look a lot of different ways, but it's incorporating largely body work with some talk therapy. Often when we think about therapy, the classic movie or TV show is some kind of psychoanalysis, Jungian or Freudian, where you lay on the couch and the therapist says, "Tell me about your mother," right?
Yeah, and just talk.
Which is all head, it's all thinking, it's engaging thinking parts. Somatic therapy starts to move the body. It can look like dance, it can look like yoga, it can look like breath work. And that was particularly instrumental for me, taking breaths, activating the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems so that I started to have full body sensation as we talked about different things. I had a wonderful therapist out of LA who would take me into some breath work, and then she would say, imagine that I'm your mother. How close do you want me to be to you? And so she would walk towards me and I'm further back, and she would step away. And so I could visually represent the strength of feelings through the work that we were doing.
So very physical.
Soma, body, that's
the body keeps the score kind of thing. The trauma lives in your body.
Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk's work is amazing in that.
Yeah, very, very important for anyone in the adoption constellation to understand that. And especially for people like my son who was adopted as a baby, he doesn't have words. He didn't have words at the time, but he still has the experience of that loss. And so any somatic experience will give you access to those traumas in much different ways than just talking about it. So
yeah, I know that when I'm doing yoga regularly, when I start to do hip work, and this actually just came up a couple of weeks ago when I was in the middle of a practice, I started to do some hip work, and all of a sudden an image came to mind of a tidal wave or an overpacked closet. And then there was one person just standing in front of the closet door trying to keep it held back. And I started laughing at the time because I'm like, there's probably still things in that closet that we haven't been able to unpack yet. But I feel so much more ready for when those things come up. That I've got a sense of body, a sense of mind, a sense of space, that we can open that closet and pull things out and work on it. But I know my hips store a lot of that pre-verbal memory.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you just need a lot of support around you if you're going to dig into that stuff. You can't do that isolated. That's too much to handle,
impossible.
Right? Yeah. You need to be in a safe space with some sort of therapist or somatic something, even like a yoga teacher maybe, or a...
Yeah, I think therapists, obviously, but it's also important that you just know that you have a trusting community around you.
Yeah. So are you involved in different groups on social media, different adoptee groups and that kind of thing?
Most of the groups that I'm involved with are real life. We will send texts to each other, check in, we'll plan Zoom sessions, but a lot of these people have been friends. Brian's been a friend for 12, 13 years now. So we've seen a lot of one another's journey and experience. And
I get the feeling from being an observer of adoptees, particularly at that conference in Louisville where I met you, that these friendships that are created between adoptees are kind of like if you both survived a tragedy or something, or you have a deep understanding of each other. And they seem to me to be very tight relationships.
Yeah. I would be interested in some ethnographic research around that, because I suspect that there are some survivor bonds. To put it into words, one, it's pre-verbal for many of us. So we had a traumatic experience before we had words or the capacity to build mental memory. So the body holds the memory of those things. And socially, to say a thing like, I think adoption needs to change, or adoption is trauma, is a phrase that I see out there. But to say that socially, agencies pour a lot of money into the hero stories and adoption is beautiful. And so there's an entire generation or 5 generations that have been brainwashed to see adoption as just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So to say anything negative about adoption invites social criticism.
For sure.
Like, how could you say that? Adoption is amazing. Why would you say anything different? So there's a whole suppressive component as well. So when adoptees get together and they hear words coming out of somebody else's mouth that they've only felt in their body or whispered silently to themselves for fear of critique, there's a resonance. And it's like, oh, you're one of my people. I get it.
Yeah.
Finally have a sense of belonging where you never, perhaps never, ever had a sense of belonging any other place.
That's exactly what I was sensing at that conference. I've been to lots of conferences in my music career, and this is different. When you adoptees and there were also NPEs and DCPs, not parent expected and donor conceived people at this conference. And there's still a lot of overlap between those communities. And I just felt honored to be a witness to all that. And I'm aligned with you guys and allied with you, but I'm not in that club. And I felt just to be a fly on the wall and watching that was really beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of love in that comment. And I know that there was another person at the conference that was kind of peripheral to a friend group that I have. And she said that she felt so accepted, and honored that even though she didn't have the kinship of the experience, that she found she was able to express things that she hasn't been able to before.
I think I remember her. She was just a friend, just kind of came along with somebody. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. And it was lovely. And I went there going, oh God, I don't know how many adoptive parents there are going to be. I know adoptees sometimes are very hostile to adoptive parents, but it wasn't like that. It was, everybody was able to exhale and just go, whew, yeah, we all get this. We all get it.
Unfairly, adoptive parents are the first enemy.
For sure. And I understand.
You're the reason that this happened. You wanted a baby.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Yep. Because I was that baby. And so I have to deal with this shit because of what you wanted.
Yep.
And that's unfair because socially there's the whole mass manipulation.
Oh, it's a major systemic problem, right? And if I hadn't adopted my son, somebody else would have. It's a systemic.
But then they would have been the enemy.
Right. And granted, I did a bunch of stuff wrong, and a lot of adoptive parents are just horrible. Not everybody, but there's some really bad adoptive parents out there. But I think a lot of us get the angst that the adoptee really wants to give to their birth parents, but they don't have access to them. So it lands on us, particularly the adoptive moms. I'm not complaining though.
Oh, yeah.
But it's tricky.
Yeah, it's a challenging situation.
It's tricky to navigate. Yeah.
Everyone.
To hold that and to not take it personally and to realize there's a lot of pain there. Just a lot.
Which is why adoptive parents probably first and foremost need to be doing so much work, on themselves.
Yes, so much. I have learned so much, and I wish I would have started when my son was much younger, but I didn't know. I was super ignorant about all of this. But when I found out, when I read The Primal Wound and got into adoption therapy, oh my gosh, my eyes were opened, and I think it's helped me for sure. I have learned so much, and I learned so much from people like you that are willing to share deeply from your experience. And then it helps me understand my son. And I just so appreciate all of the connections that I've made and all the things that I've learned. It's certainly enriched my life for sure. And I know it's helping my son, even though he's still struggling.
Yeah.
I hope maybe someday you'll meet him. I think he would really dig you. You remind me of him a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with him at some point.
Were you always kind of an out-of-the-box kind of thinker? You strike me as kind of a nonconformist. Have you always felt a little bit off the mainstream?
Yeah, I think that life has always been a little bit different. I also do internal family systems. I'm a level 2 practitioner for internal family systems.
I love IFS.
And one of the things with IFS is practitioners need to be doing their own mapping. And just this morning, I was in a meditation and I met the stranger, which is a part. His role so far to this point is like, oh, they're not like me. Oh, they're not like me. Oh, they're not like me. And so continually identifying ways in which other people are not like me. They don't have this experience. They don't have this skill set. They don't have this passion. So this morning, literally this morning, I just spent time with a stranger to say, hey, listen, there's a lot of difference. And if we always look for difference, then that's what we're going to find. And that in that difference is diversity, and are there things that we can pick up from people who are unlike me.
That's beautiful.
So we just had a wonderful little meditation time this morning.
I had a conversation with your stranger. That's amazing. I love IFS. I would like to get certified in it eventually. And it's helped me so much. And it helps my son too. And we just talk about parts all the time. It's just part of our vocabulary. It's really good stuff.
IFS is such a fascinating tool. I know that we've had some conversations around this, so we can get into this, but I find the combination of working with psychedelics and IFS to be very complementary.
I bet. Okay, so psychedelics. How did you get into psychedelics? Was it something you dabbled in when you were a kid, or something you came into later on as a therapeutic process?
I grew up with the war on drugs. So,
Oh, yeah.
this is your brain.
Yep, the
This is your
fried
brain
egg.
on drugs,
Yep.
the frying
Yep.
egg, right? Which was always funny to me because, I grew up with two drunks. And so they valorized alcohol and just said, well, alcohol, tobacco, that kind of the socially acceptable drugs. And I had friends who smoked pot. I myself could never smoke. Like, I don't like inhaling. So the drugs that I was introduced to through the teenage kind of rebellion years were more like pills. Once in early adulthood, I had done mushrooms, but there was always a fear, around, oh my gosh, am I gonna overdose? And I was also part of an evangelical Christian community, which again valorized alcohol.
I grew up in one of those too.
Yeah.
Yeah, alcohol was fine.
Yeah, alcohol's good so long as you're not drunk too much.
Yeah, don't overdo it. But
yeah,
isn't that fascinating?
it was, yeah.
And alcohol is so much more dangerous than most drugs, and particularly psychedelics. Way more dangerous.
It's fascinating how we draw those lines, socially and in our brains.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of experience with that. Once I got into some somatic therapy, that unloaded, a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I started doing, I started to notice how I felt in social situations, both with and without THC. I mean, that was legalized in Colorado, so I had access to it.
Okay.
And so I actually started to do kind of a microdose. I would do 2 milligrams of THC, and then I would observe what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind.
And were you vaping because you don't like smoke?
No, I do mints. Yeah, I would do like a 2 milligram mint.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that was really helpful in some of the social anxieties that I was feeling. But I didn't want to have 20 milligrams of THC. It was more like whatever chemical process is happening in my brain, I anticipate that my body is capable of mimicking that. And actually, some of this came through Besser Van der Kolk, Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
Because THC activates some pretty natural processes in the body. Even chemicals like DMT are produced by the body. Yeah. And so it's out there in a form of more, concentration and more effect, but the body produces it. So I started to work with cortisol, relaxation, and just figuring out how to fit things into narratives rather than being stuck in a cortisol adrenal response. And so for a couple of years, once a week or so, I would do a 2 milligram THC mint and then meditate on what's happening in the body. And I just noticed that cortisol response relaxing. I noticed triggering mechanisms started to let go. And now as I look back through IFS, I understand, there were some protectors built around that were just told, hey, you can chill out a little bit. And then once they relaxed, then we could do some.
Now, for those that don't know IFS, can you briefly explain what the protectors do?
Yeah, IFS is a theory of mind that articulates a couple of things. One, a person is multiple, not in the direction of like Sybil or some of the pop culture split personality kind of stuff.
Dissociative identity disorder.
But that, inside are multiple elements. Some of them are vying for control, like a firefighter, somebody who starts to move when there's a triggering mechanism.
Yeah, like I'll take care of that. I got it right now.
Like, no, we got to calm that down. We got to shut that down. Whereas a manager or a protector is operating before a triggering to make sure that things don't happen wrongly. A protector or a manager's mantra is that'll never happen again. Right. And so traumatic events come in, they create this trauma around an exile or a little one. And then the managers are like, no, that can't happen. And so the manager then blocks off. No, that set of activity is prohibited right here.
Yeah.
And if the manager can't handle it, then a firefighter comes in and it's like, well, we got to get rid of this feeling. So we're going to eat, we're going to do drugs, we're going to escape, this somehow. And the ultimate firefighter is suicide. Yeah. If this is too much, we pull the chute and we're out. Yeah. So IFS believes in multiplicity of individuals, but, whereas Sybil would be 100% multiple, it's always fractured.
Mm-hmm.
IFS is probably like 3%.
Oh, I see. I always like to think of that Disney movie Inside Out.
Inside Out is a beautiful example of all of the things that are happening inside.
It's just like a psychology course right there in that film. And everyone can relate to those parts, the committee in your head, that's,
that it's a beautiful illustration of this. And the second kind of primary element of IFS is that the core of self is unbroken and incapable of being harmed.
Mm-hmm.
And that the self can heal all of the trauma that the other parts carry.
Yes. And the self, some people call soul or higher self or
the divine, the inner wisdom.
Energy.
Yeah. Lots of different names around it. And the beauty of IFS is there's not a dogma around, it's this, not that.
Right. It's very open.
It's like this living energy, this wholeness.
So you can call it whatever you want.
And so, so you unblend, like you've got a part forward. If a manager is running the life, then you can unblend, let the self come forward. Then the manager gets access to self, and you make different decisions.
Nice.
Like you get whole.
Yeah. It's been so helpful for our family to talk about these parts. And my son has a very strong suicidal part. A really loud suicidal part that he struggled with forever. But recently, Brad Reedy taught me this. He said that the suicidal part is not trying to kill you. It's trying to kill off whatever part is causing you the pain. And I told that to Joey, and he's like, oh, that makes sense, because I really don't want to die. Like, this part is so loud, but that makes sense. He's just trying to kill some part of my life that's feeling really terrible.
Yeah.
So that's really helped. And we're able to talk in that parts language. And God, I literally think that's keeping him alive in some serious ways. So I'll put a few IFS resources in there, but you also do IFS therapy? Do you call that?
Yeah, I do. I do an IFS practice. So mostly Zoom, but for people who are nearby, I do in-person IFS consults.
Is it better in person or does it matter?
I don't think that it matters. One of the differences for me is like telephone only versus Zoom.
Oh, you need to be able to see each other.
Because I've been in session with people and I've watched a part take on a different physicality.
Really?
Right in the middle of this stuff. So then I'm like, here's something that I observed. Can you tell me what you're feeling, or can you tell me what you just experienced? So being able to see them matters.
You've used psychedelics yourself with IFS. And do you also help other people with psychedelics?
Yeah. So I had some psychedelic experiences, but there was a lot of fear around it. After I did the microdosing with THC, a lot of that fear released. And then I started listening to some contemporary speakers like Sam Harris share their experiences, some of the leaders who brought us into these spaces, Ram Dass and Terrence McKenna. And then I had a son die by suicide in 2019. And after about a year and a few months, and I was very kind to myself. I gave myself space and I listened to the grief and made opportunity. But I just got to a place where my griever part felt so sorrowful about missing Gabriel that I had a very strong suicidal part come in and say, we don't have to stay.
This is too much.
We can go. And so at that point, I didn't have the parts language around it, but I told my wife that this is it, that I can't continue to live in a world where he isn't.
Oh, gosh.
And, it was a very real moment. And I know that it created anxiety for her.
I bet.
Which wasn't my objective at all. I just wanted to be communicative about what was happening.
Help protect you, if anything.
And so I had a friend who brought several grams of mushrooms, and he said, I'll sit with you. And so over a weekend, I did a heroic journey, and it was easily one of the most profound experiences outside of the birth of my children in my life.
And just heroic journey for people that aren't familiar.
Yeah. So a magic mushroom has psilocybin and psilocin, and these are the chemicals that get connected to the brain receptors that induce the experience. So at any level, there's a connection. So if you're microdosing, perhaps you're at 125 milligrams of dried substance. And this may constitute 12 milligrams of psilocybin in the active ingredient.
Okay. So tiny
so that would be like a microdose. And then you're looking at a mini dose, which may be 500 milligrams. And then you can look at a dose. And these are often what people would consider recreational, something between 1 to 2.5 milligrams of dried mushroom.
Okay.
So you've got your microdose, your mini dose, your dose. And then once you're above 2 grams, roughly, depending on the species of mushroom, what's considered to be a therapeutic dose.
Okay.
Up until you hit about 5 grams and above of dried mushroom is considered a heroic dose.
Okay.
And I wrestle with the language sometimes because it's not heroic like slaying a dragon. It is heroic in that you are deepening the level of journey.
Yeah, because if you intentionally go into a heroic dose of psilocybin, you are wanting some sort of awakening or some sort of major healing. You don't just dabble into this.
You were doing some kind of exploration.
Yeah. It's no joke. And, you need to do that under, like you said, your friend was going to sit with you, which, why don't you explain what that means?
Yeah, he's a guide or a sitter. Some people use different language. Sometimes it'll be called a shaman, but I really respect the indigenous communities that have kept this alive for thousands of years. So he wouldn't call himself a shaman. When I sit with people, I don't call myself a shaman. I call myself a sitter or a guide. And we are there, as a guide, we are there to take care of the physical body while the soul or the mind does this journey.
Yeah. My son did a bunch of psychedelics without a sitter by himself, and it caused him to try to kill himself because he wanted to stay. It was so beautiful and awakening that he wanted to stay there. So if he had had a sitter, he wouldn't have been able to kill himself. Luckily, it didn't work, but it's really important.
I think it's important to understand with psychedelics, particularly at that therapeutic dose and above. Now, even in a microdose, right, there are 3 phases or 3 stages. One is your prep.
Okay.
Why are you doing this thing?
Yes.
Because there are many ways in. You can do breath work. You can do psychedelics. You can have talk therapy.
EMDR.
In fact, I remember Ram Dass has this beautiful story about he's sharing these truths from beyond when this woman is sitting up front and she's nodding, but she's got her black leather purse and her doily cap. And he's like, how is she knowing, like, she's right here with me? She's clearly not a psychonaut. And after the talk, he's like, hey, what's going on? She's like, oh, I knit. And I love the little story, but there are so many ways in. So the first stage is prep. Why are you doing this thing?
Yeah.
The second stage is the period of dosing, right? So with a microdose, you shouldn't feel the effects. So sometimes my microdoses come really close to a mini dose, but I just feel a little bit of electricity, kind of behind the tongue or in the brain, and that's for a couple of hours.
Okay.
But the microdose may last, 4 to 6 hours, like running through the system. Once you get into doses or therapeutic doses, you're probably looking at somewhere between 4 and 8 hours.
Yeah. It's like an all-day thing.
Yeah. My heroic dose was an 8-hour experience.
I bet.
In the afterglow. Ooh. So you've got the prep work. Why are you doing this? You've got the dose stage where you're actually experiencing the effects, whatever they may be. And then you have the integration phase.
Super important.
Which is like, okay, here is something that I encountered. Now let me integrate in my waking time, finited, this plane of existence experience, integrate what I had, in that other place.
That's the piece that Joey did not get. And I think that would have made a huge difference.
Integration is vital. I mean, all of them are vital, but integration is kind of ignored in many of the popular conversations around psychedelics at this point.
Yeah.
Dr. Ito Cohen is out of California, and he's got a brilliant Instagram feed where he constantly iterates the importance of integration.
Nice. Yeah, it's huge. That's where the real life changes can occur, because you take this kind of mysterious thing that just happened to you, and then you can put it into your real life and have it influence your real life on this planet part.
Yeah. My last big dose was January of 2022. So over a year plus at this point. But I continue to have moments of integration with what I experienced there. And so I won't do another journey until I feel like I've integrated these things and I'm ready for the next thing.
Yeah. It's funny because I did a journey myself. I was kind of curious, and I had done so much reading because of Joey's experience. And I also had read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, before I found out he had ever worked with psychedelics at all. And so I understood the potential. And then Joey just about died a couple times using it the wrong way. And then I was like, I really want to figure this out, because maybe this would be helpful for Joey eventually when he's in a better place, that he can take all this in and do that work before and after. So I did one, and it was January 2022. Just like you.
Yeah.
And I am still benefiting from it. It is still cooking. It was transformative for me. I actually made a whole podcast episode, but I didn't publish it. So if anyone wants it, I can give it to you privately.
I'd like to hear that.
Would you?
Yeah.
I'll send it to you. Yeah. I decided I'm a teacher, and I just better not put that out to the public. But if anyone wants to ask about it, I'd be happy to share it. It was extremely powerful. And I have very high hopes for psychedelics helping adoptees and just people in the near future. And you're in Oregon. What's happening with psychedelics in Oregon?
Yeah, Oregon was the first state to decriminalize psilocybin. Actually, Oregon decriminalized a lot of drugs so that there's not criminal penalties at the possession level.
Okay.
If you're distributing, there are certain quantities that you just can't carry. Right?
Okay.
So Oregon has decriminalized all psilocybin particularly, but several drugs. And there's an OPA, Oregon Psilocybin Act, where they are working at developing licensure for facilities where people can guide, or be guided. They're working at licensing guides or sitters, working at licensing growers that are tested by the state, so that there's, an element of regulation. Like, yes, we know this is good, this is not going to be harmful.
So you know what you're getting.
And then working at licensing testing facilities to make sure that what's getting served is, so they're licensing 4 different.
That's great. And I understand the VA, the Veterans Administration, is actively, like, in the final stages of testing vets with PTSD, which is one of the very big things that they hope that psychedelics will really help. And I'm so hopeful. I'm like, okay, if the federal government is testing this with the VA, that means it's not too far off.
Yeah, vets have got short end of the stick.
Yeah, so many ways.
It's like, we're going to train you, we're going to send you off, you're going to experience trauma, and then we're going to cut you loose.
Yeah.
There really should be a lot more services for veterans.
Yeah. I'm hopeful. My wife is actually a veteran, and so we're kind of keeping an eye out. So see if it comes available for her to try.
Yeah, that's great. Just going to say that other psychedelics that are out there in the conversation are MDMA and ketamine. Ketamine is already licensed, so it's off script, but MDMA is being tested, and it's on the near horizon for potential federal approval.
Yeah, and MDMA is very promising. I think that was the first one they started with, right?
Yeah, they did.
And it's also known as Molly, as the party drug, or ecstasy. But this is medical MDMA, and it operates similarly, but not quite exactly the same way as psilocybin.
Yeah. I have not had an MDMA experience, but I have friends who have been in it. And MDMA is both serotogenic as well as dopaminergic. And so it hits a couple of different places in the brain. And not having had that experience, I've only sat with one person who was in MDMA. I largely don't feel like I have had a sufficient number of experiences myself to be able to guide with them.
Okay, I see.
I have sat once. Ketamine, I have experienced. It's very similar to psilocybin. And likewise in the dosing. You can have a very small dose and let some of the protectors relax.
Sure.
or you can have a big dose where you actually have a somewhat cosmic experience.
Wow.
I don't guide MDMA because I haven't had that experience. I don't guide ketamine because for the most part, it's a medical drip.
It's an IV, right?
I mean, you can do powder, you can sniff it, or you can take it as a capsule, but it feels to me not unnatural in a negative way, but it did not cohere with my spirit the way that psilocybin did.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when I guide people, I do so with psilocybin, and we have all the prep work.
It does seem a little different with a plant. I don't know. Or fungus.
It is. And I don't know if that's
I don't know.
Psychosomatic. I don't know if that's a story that I'm making up. But for me, psilocybin feels very akin to where my spirit is already.
Yeah.
You know, like it's growing from the earth, you know, as I did. So
yeah, there's something about that. I agree with you. Tell me, what do you see as particularly beneficial for adoptees regarding psychedelics and the hope for things to come down the pike here?
I'm going to go back to the complementary relationship of IFS and psychedelics. Adoptees in particular, and there are lots of groups who could share this experience as well, carry both preverbal trauma as well as generational trauma or shame. And so there can be protectors that are built up around their more sensitive parts. And those protectors are fears. Either as a manager or as a firefighter, they are really going to take care of that little one.
Oh, fierce, like FIERCE?
Fierce, yeah.
Fierce,
they are strongly protective,
you know,
of that tender part. You can do a lot of like IFS where you're talking through it. You can have great talk therapy. You can have great somatic therapy and get to it. So there's a lot of ways in. For me, the relationship of IFS with a psychedelic is you have immediate access to that protector, and you just get to say to that protector, hey, we're here for your concerns. What do you want to do? And the protector is like, well, I'm just going to chill out a little bit. Do you want to talk to the little one?
Oh, okay. Wow.
So you can dive right into some of those spaces without bypassing protectors. Like you're not trying to trick anybody. You know, there's no arm twisting.
They're in on it with you.
Yeah. They just are more willing to relax more quickly and trust the situation as it unfolds. So psychedelics gets to that preverbal, it gets into that cultural burden, the cultural legacy things, and it really lets journeyers face it instead of having it kind of in the background or like a rock in your shoe that you're just not going to take out.
And I bet having a guide that is also an adoptee would help tremendously for an adoptee wanting to do this work.
Yeah, I've guided a few adoptees. What's funny to me is that the adoption itself doesn't come directly into it. There's a mythopoetic language around dream, and that goes into the psychedelic experience. So you might see something like, I'm going to share one of my own. I was holding a penny, and on one side of the penny was Abraham Lincoln in kind of a cartoonish caricature. And on the other side of the penny was a shark.
Okay.
And so as I flipped the penny, and I wasn't holding a penny, this was all, you know, in my mind, I could see Lincoln, I could see the shark, I could see Lincoln, I could see the shark. But there wasn't any fear around it. And so I was able to just process what was happening in that experience. And I really don't have to share the experience. It's like, well, this is about money. Well, no, it wasn't about money. It was about something else, but it gave me a sense of ease. And so when I came out of the experience, something had just relaxed. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't bother me anymore.
Okay, nice.
And so it's not a direct one-to-one, but it wasn't about adoption. It wasn't about a lot of things. It was just like, once I came out of it, adoption mattered less.
Oh, wow. Wow.
You know, and so that's the mythopoetics. And that's one of the reasons that I think IFS is a good complementary, because it too shares in that dream imaginative space. And I think this is one of the things that I would tell anyone in this. To say that it's in the imagination can sound dismissive, like it's not real. But just because it's in the imagination doesn't mean it isn't real.
Oh, yeah. I talk to any artist or creator. Imagination is super real.
Yeah.
It's
very real.
Super important.
It's just not physical.
Yeah, right.
And so it feels less real, but
yeah,
you know, it's just as powerful.
What's your vision for psychedelics in the adoption space?
In the adoption space, particularly for those adoptees who feel like they carry a lot of cultural burdens, both the burdens of their adoptive family, stretching back generations, as well as their biological family, that something like psychedelics, again, in the prep, there are many ways in, but the prep is really where you're going to sit down and say, okay, here's what we're moving towards. Did they come back into the life after a journey and say, you know what, I can take this on, I can do this thing, that they are more whole in themselves, more complete. Yeah, so that's my vision.
That's beautiful. I have so much hope for this. I hope someday my son will be at a place where he can dive into it safely with a guide and do the whole thing. And I hope it brings him some peace and some understanding or unraveling about what's all gone on. So I'm very impressed with you. You have so much grief and loss and sad shit in your life. And you have dealt with a great deal of it, sounds like to me, and are helping others. So I just admire you very much for doing all that.
Well, thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you. If people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
I'm on Instagram. That's a pretty open channel to get to me. Yeah. If you're on Facebook, 6-Word Adoption Memoirs Project is on Facebook, and I continue to get messages through that. The unfortunate thing with me and Facebook is I'm just not there.
Okay.
Instagram I'm pretty active with. So Instagram is probably the easiest way to connect with me.
And you're just there as Ridghaus on Instagram?
Yeah, at Ridghaus.
Ridghaus.
No E.
No E. All right. And I imagine your adoptive parents did not name you that. Was that a name you created after?
They did not. No, that is a mononym, self-assigned. And it's a mononym portmanteau of my biological mother and biological father's families.
Nice. I love it. I know several adoptees that have changed their names, and I think that's really empowering and just like, I get to decide.
Yeah, I know this is this is probably another stretch, but there was a song where they were saying, here I am at 25 with a name I did not choose. And I was listening to that song and I was like, yeah, I didn't pick this name either. I've got another LDA friend who now goes by JJ. And recently she sent me a message and she's like, watching your journey and you choosing things for yourself gave me a lot of strength in doing this. In fact, I've got 2 LDA friends within the last year and a half who have done this. One who now goes by Freya, and that is such a perfect name for her. So we do names all the time. It's just some of us go the extra step and make it our legal name, and it's a little bit more, but still choosing this thing for me, how do I interface with the world? It's through Ridghaus.
Well, that's the only name I know you by, and I think it totally fits. So I can't imagine you anything else. Well, thank you for this very interesting discussion. I hope people look you up. I hope people that had not ever heard of using psychedelics in a therapeutic manner might look into it a little bit more. It's a fascinating area. I hope everybody will open up a little bit and just kind of explore, because I think there's a lot of potential for healing, and there certainly needs to be a lot of healing in this space. It's a lot of pain.
And there's so many indigenous writers out there who are talking about the medicine work that they've held for generations.
Yes. Yeah, this is definitely not something new, people. This is ancient.
No, not at all. Yeah. And we owe so much to those cultures for holding this for this time that we have now. One of the other books that was really helpful for me was Braiding Sweetgrass, but Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception.
Okay, yes.
Because it has a trip experience in it.
Yes, interesting. Okay, I'll list all those books. And yes, we do owe the indigenous communities a great amount of gratitude and honor, because it seems like this is all coming down the pike new, but oh my goodness, it's so not new. And
thousands of years.
We do not own this idea at all. No. It is something we can learn greatly from our indigenous friends. So, well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate your being open to talking about your life and your work. And I hope lots of people find you. And if you would like to share this episode, whoever is listening to this, please share it with anyone you think might be helped by it. And I want you all to mark your calendars for a very special event that Ridghaus is involved with. Unraveling Adoption is hosting a webinar called Sacred Plant Medicine for Healing the Adoption Constellation, How Psychedelic Journeys Can Heal Trauma. So Ridghaus will be a panelist. Brian Stanton will be a panelist. Leslie Pate McKinnon will be on. She has been on our podcast before. Leslie Johnson and Mi Oak Ikaro. They are all going to be expert panelists. I'm going to be hosting it, and it's a free webinar Sunday, December 3rd from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific, which is 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Look in the show notes for the registration link so you can get your free ticket. I also want to invite you all to become Patreon members if you are enjoying our podcast and want to support this mission. It helps us to maintain this commercial-free podcast. It does cost a lot of money actually to have all the software and the materials I need to make this podcast work. And in fact, I was listening to another podcast, or actually it was a radio show with a really beautifully sensitive topic with someone in the adoption constellation was sharing their delicate, vulnerable story. And they broke away for commercial, and it was like, do you have unsightly toenail fungus? I'm like, oh my goodness, I can never do that. I do not ever want to put on ads, but I do need help covering the expenses of this enterprise. So if you would like to help with just $5 or $10 or $25 a month, you can join Patreon at patreon.com/unravelingadoption. And I want to welcome our newest Patreon supporter, Ava. She has been a longtime friend of mine and our families, and I just so appreciate your support of me all along, and especially in this new venture. Thank you so much, Ava. You can find Unraveling Adoption on Facebook. I actually am on Facebook all the time, unlike Ridge, and Instagram and YouTube. And if you are an adoptive parent or foster parent and would like some support, I have a free adoptive parent group called Aptitude. You can find information about that on my website, unravelingadoption.com. So thank you all for listening. I really appreciate the time you spent with us in this enriching conversation. Rich and I want you all to stay safe.